Welcome to poetry reading. Jameson Fitzpatrick, McClure, and Angelo Nicolopoulos. So thanks for coming out tonight. You find yourself right now in the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which we like to say is a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. I am the co-founder with my partner, Donna Jokum. My name is Greg Newton, and we have Kelly Roberts volunteering, helping us out tonight. So thank you for coming out, and let's jump right in. And welcome to everyone joining us out in cyberspace. So I'm going to introduce our first poet. Oh, I forgot, I have a bag here for a reason. I'm supposed to ask for donations. We are an all-volunteer organization, and donations help us to keep doing what we're doing and keep this place full of great queer books and queer art. So we have a suggested donation of $10. There's change in the bag, but give what you can. And if money is tight and you want to buy books, like poetry books from tonight's poets, you should hold on to your money and save that for the books. But I'll pass this around, and if you can give something, we appreciate it. Oh, there's change in there. So we are going to begin with Jameson. Lovely to have you back. Yes. Jameson Fitzpatrick is the author of the poetry collection Pricks in the Tapestry from Birds, a finalist for the 2021 Thom Gunn Award, and the chapbooks Mr. Is there a thing? Yeah. Mr. Ant, is that an ampersand? Mr. Ampersand, and Morrisroe, Erasures. She teaches expository writing at NYU. Please welcome Jameson Fitzpatrick.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be back here. Thank you, Angelo, for inviting me to celebrate your book, which I'm so excited about. I'm going to be reading from a work in progress. It's a book. It's loosely based on Strauss's opera Der Rosenkavalier, which is about a woman getting older. She's called The Marschallin, and she's about 32. I'm writing you from the head of a pin to market. There comes a point in some lives at which it is too late to have ever been a young woman. I think I'm the only one dancing up here. Can my solipsism cast me still as a naif? Elsewhere, the angels I am sing, what does the pin pierce and why? A map? Somewhere someone wants to remember they've been. A piece of cloth, a new hem, a leg by accident or for relief. Now for me. How can it be I wasn't and wouldn't be? Discursive voice. A pants part in opera refers to a male role written for a female voice. Please forgive the crudeness of the terms in which I've accepted to speak. Also called a breeches or a trousers role. I prefer pants part because I am a poet writing in English. From the German Hosenrolle. Pants parts are most often written for mezzo-soprano or contralto vocal ranges. The characters written as pants parts are most often teenage boys. Their high voices are meant to convey youth, though they need not be played by young women. Der Rosenkavalier's Octavian, sung by a mezzo-soprano, is one of the operatic repertoire's most famous pants parts. If I could choose, I'd be a contralto, as I don't know who I'd be if I weren't deep-voiced. Though I wasn't once, when I was a boy soprano. Though if I were a contralto, I couldn't play the Marschallin. To be fair, even if I'd stayed a soprano, to play the Marschallin, I would have to have had a still different life, an opera singer's. When I sang most seriously, I preferred smoking and not practicing. I still do, though I smoke less and practice more now that I'm older. In most stage versions of Peter Pan, the role of Peter is a kind of pants part. He won't grow up. Octavian, the audience must imagine, will. When I was a child, I wanted to be anything but, hence the smoking. Though my imagination stopped there, as though caught in the throat of something. Wendy Darling voice. The way Wendy knew was this. One day I was already old. I was young until I wasn't. I wasn't until I was young. I wasn't and I was young. Until I wasn't, I was young. Until I wasn't young, and then I wasn't. I was young until I wasn't old, not yet, but in a bad mood I might forget. When I was young before anything else. I was young before anything. I was young before. After young comes, after young came. J.M. Barrie's 1904 play, Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, is a good example of a story in which the eponymous character is not the protagonist. This is discursive voice again. Wendy Darling is the protagonist of Peter Pan, as hers is the central drama. Barrie must have agreed. The first edition of the novel version was published under the title Peter and Wendy in 1911, though I prefer the misdirection of the original. The central drama of Peter Pan is that Wendy does grow up. The best scene in Peter Pan is the epilogue, when Peter returns years later to discover this. It was my favorite as a child because it is the saddest, because Wendy has to choose to break Peter's heart by turning up the light and revealing her advanced age to him. I was not like the Lost Boys, demanding happy ends to the stories young Wendy told them. This scene was not in the original stage production. Barrie wrote it later under the title When Wendy Grew Up, an afterthought. An afterthought. Octavian is the titular role in Der Rosenkavalier, the Knight of the Rose or the Rose Bearer. It's not a real rose, it's a silver one, an engagement gift he presents on behalf of another man, the Marschallin's awful cousin, the Baron. To the beautiful young Sophie, with whom he falls in love at first sight, though she is to marry the Baron and Octavian is already in love with the beautiful married Marschallin. The central drama of Der Rosenkavalier, which is a comedy, is the Marschallin becoming an afterthought. The last word of Peter and Wendy is heartless, though out of context, the intended irony is lost. Never to be someone's mother, no, but someone's friend. Someone's mother's friend, to whom two girls late and soaked through come home, to the two of us at the table, drinking. How is it I'm no longer one of them, running in from the rain, but someone's friend's mother's friend? Discursive voice. When I was a child enthusiast of Greek mythology, my favorite scene to play act was Goddess bidding farewell to her mortal lover. This relationship dynamic between a goddess and a mortal man is an example of what Claude Lévi-Strauss called a mytheme, a gross constituent unit of myth. This mytheme appears to have also been a favorite of Sappho's. Eva Stella identifies 4 myths of this type among the poet's extant fragments and citations: Eos and Tithonus, Selene and Endymion, Aphrodite and Adonis, and Aphrodite and Phaon. When Goddess bidding farewell to her mortal lover was my favorite make-believe scene, I didn't know the term mytheme, but knew the name Sappho and the stories of Eos and Tithonus and of Aphrodite and Adonis. Eos and Tithonus is an ideological myth accounting for the origin of cicadas. Eos, the divine personification of dawn, is so taken with Tithonus, a Trojan prince that she carries, in some versions kidnaps him to her palace at the end of the earth. So that they might continue to love indefinitely, she persuades Zeus to grant him immortality. But she forgets to request eternal youth for him too, and so Tithonus in time grows old, wasting away until he is nothing but an undying husk and a complaining voice. That is, a cicada. The mortal lovers of this myth theme rarely fare well. Adonis gets gored by a boar while he and Aphrodite are out hunting one day. He dies in her arms, and from his blood blossoms the first anemone, another etiology. The earliest documented reference to Adonis is Sappho's. Last summer, the largest brood of 17-year cicadas in the eastern United States is due to return. Trillions of them will emerge from an underground dormancy the length of Octavian's life. Brood X. Before he died, Aphrodite had to share Adonis with Persephone, who raised him from infancy and later took him as a lover. Weird, in the usual way of Greek myth, though to love a man is so often to love a boy in need of mothering. The Marshallin knows this. Now I have to comfort the boy, as does Wendy Darling. No one knows it so well as I. While neither is a goddess, one feels in them a certain ascendancy of character, an X quality. One. When, in childhood, I played the part of goddess bidding farewell to her mortal lover, I was breaking his heart to spare him a worse fate. This, too, is an etiological story, a gross constituent unit. I was offended, not years ago, when my husband introduced me as precocious, but in the next moment, when his friend said, "That's a word for children," as you would expect a child to be. Discursive voice. He's leaving for college soon. We're rising freshmen. I'm sure I've either saved him or ruined his life. Next week, I start 9th grade. But tonight, I'm breaking up with him in the basement of my parents' house. Though in the tense in which I'm writing, I just have called it my house, my basement. For the last 2 years, he's been the assistant director of the middle school musicals. Twice he cast me as the star. A star, though I want to say they double cast all the roles. Participation, trophy, culture. At the beginning of the summer, he cast me as his father in a chamber musical about 2 young lovers who save one another or ruin each other's lives. He drove me home from the read-through because I asked him to, because I wanted to seduce him. I'm breaking up with him not because I want to, but because it seems like the right thing to do. My position is an ethical one. I love you, but I want you to be free. I love you, so I want you to be free. I imagine myself as magnanimous. I imagine I have the power to free him. He's been cheating on me with his ex-girlfriend, who was still his girlfriend when he began cheating on her with me. By now, everyone in town knows about us. I ruined his life to save him from it, I think. Thought. He thanks me. We weep together a little longer in the basement. Eventually, we do rise. But the bald man he'll soon become, I can't believe. And no sooner, who would become of me? What did the child dream of back home in the provinces with nothing behind but landscape? Something like this life, though it felt different in the dream. As though she had the outline right, but not what was required to fill it. During this period, she struggled to spell the word silhouette correctly, had a favorite tree. She didn't wonder if she'd get lonesome for the valley, though. Beyond the field was more field, then forest, becoming mountains. Though later, before certain audiences, I'd learned to call them hills. Thank you so much.
Jameson. So our next reader, Monica McClure, is the author of the poetry collection Tender Data, also from Birds, and the chapbooks Concomitance, Counterpath, Boss, Parts 1 and 2, If a Leaf Falls Press, Mala for Claudia, and Mood Swing from Snacks Press. Please welcome Monica McClure.
So we're here to celebrate Angelo's new book. Something about Angelo is that he's not a poet in his life. He's responsible, reliable, generous, generally egoless. Angelo has been like a big sister to me for more than a decade. For example, I recently reproduced, and when I was enormously pregnant and was told I needed to walk the baby out, Angelo and I went to Home Depot, which is our heaven. We listened to the Dixie Chicks. We're basic. We still call them the Dixie Chicks. That's how basic we are. So Angelo saves all of the indulgence and pleasure and frivolity and beauty for beauty's sake for his poetry. So you should buy the book and wear a condom. Inheritance is a sisterly poem dedicated to Angelo. I gave my youngest sister a spoonful of oats. I gave my younger sister the chance to be good. I have to lift the toilet seat to spray the grime and wipe and dig the swipe around the edges of the objects in the bathroom of the gas station and pull my ponytail through my red cap and accept the compliment, "You're not as lazy as she said you was," and hand the hot chicken to the woman who was 3 days sleepless with rage and offer to let her beat my ass with hands transformed into Swarovski crystals and eyes the color of uncooked meth. I gave my younger sister a marigold. I gave my youngest sister AI-generated perfume. I am the eldest sister and therefore a thief. I must go back to the Southside Clubhouse, the city pool where the water is acrid and mine to watch from the stand, the bodies browner than my own and tamed by the Lions Club. It takes less than a whistle to bring the cops crawling up the walk, reptilian sons of white hens, just to chat and glare standing under my thighs, placing one pink hand near my foot, the gold below the knuckle, just sinews and chicken bone. I am the eldest sister and therefore wealthy. I have to man the register the mother has left to nurse her sick child, and at day's end, I must find it $200 short and alert the woman without papers who got this job, her first at 12, by saying 16 and a citizen. And though she claims it's my mistake, I hear it in the mother's voice when I call, but I also hear it when this woman cries, "They'll fire me." And I see her beaded please, that circle of prayers around her throat when she cries. I'd played it before, this big bag we do when risks fail. I could take this one. I could afford to lose a job. I'm 16. I've been known to make math mistakes, to be high, and even to steal, but we are all so innocent, as clean as the next broke girl with her plush bed of cons, her lies, the hair she broke with a dollar store comb, and more numerous than rubies in a forest fire. I gave my younger sister a decent name. I gave my youngest sister bad advice. I have to unfurl the hose and drag it from kennel to kennel, spraying the shit into the drain under the watchful sun of community service. It runs in brown rivulets and the stench is sad, sick of spirit, and wrongly sweet, more like an outpouring of defeat, unlike the shit of humans, which is recalcitrant and proud. This summer, I'm not eating, I'm doing penance for a crime, nor do I know by the tale the war this man speaks of as he twirls a possum like a lasso over his head. They don't scare me, he says. He tread a river of dead bodies in Vietnam. My geraniums have been decapitated by a creature with strong, flat teeth. Father flinches at amputated limbs, his sobriety tight as a wire these days. I gave my youngest sister a bishop's hat. I gave my younger sister a creeping blue star. It surrounded her son like a cloak of moss, like the coat of Joseph, like a gasping magic breath that made him appear fluorescent and precious among the rot. I am the eldest sister, and therefore I must sort one paper from the next, peering over an edge where a blonde woman on her last wooden leg has built a palace of beige dust in plain view of her employer, her fragile grip on the hem of her red skirt as she tugs knit over an unmoving chain of joints which she dragged to a corner of an attorney's office once and never returned. From here, I can watch women behind a bulletproof lens. And tomorrow I'll put my body between a hedge fund and an elevator as the earth quakes wary up 32 floors. How quaint these working girls in pencil skirts around the fountain, unwrapping their lunches in 2012 and calling their moms, their roommates, twirling their drizzle of day pearls, turning mythological tricks with every coffee stir. Pinched between chrome nails, their weight loss journals, their savings, their hangovers and schemes, the husbands with second families, our sugar daddies, our cocaine straws. I'm wearing the dress she wore to her mother's funeral. It's black and white. I keep it. And the night we dined on her dad's credit card, I remember our need to be filled up, the sound of her being penetrated as the tranquilizers wrapped me and a mother. Remember, I don't have a mother, I have another sister. I gave her a handbag on fire, which she buries in the day and exhumes at night like a firefly Chanel in the fracklands. I gave all my sisters rising flurries of pebbles, which sumptuously overflow their champagne flutes. I must speak to the boss over an empty desk as he tilts in his pool of vodka and urine, a buoy, and an offshore rig. What can a man who has never worked teach me of this work? So much, it seems. He moves his father's fortune from one pad to the next peninsula, an island, a sail, a rental, an asset, a liquid tide, coming in with promises and contracts leveraged against my liable lost farm, beset with boll weevil. And when I move my hand to my mouth to show him how we're living, he says, "Go watch her. She's not like us." So I walk to my seat and study the smooth wrist of my friend at work, every eyelash, every phone lift. The gangster realtor speaks, something's in it for me, for us, but what? A porky man reaches to strangle her neck. I pull at his shoulder and clench my fist. No one comes. We don't call the cops. We call the cops. And later, when the hired guard is escorting us out, she demands, "Treat me as you would treat your own daughter." Good news, child hunger has ended in the United States. Apparently, it ended more than 50 years ago. I gave my younger sister an $18 cocktail. I gave my youngest sister microgreens dressed in preserved lemon, ring, pop, yacht, 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 gunshot, automatic. Yes, I am talking about being poor in America. Suck my dick. I am no longer poor. Hunger has ended in America. Now, when my sister takes the debit card to the grocery store, it will not be declined. And now, when we put the cake on the table, it will not be stolen by a desperate child named after a luxury car. With golden hair, Mercedes, with your ashen face, Myra, with your lottery ball, Monica, and the slot machines lining the street. I saw my people out for a degree, a seat at the bar, a platform from which to bemoan. They say I have to twist the key on some prison cells first. I must tie my ankle to a sector, choke on it. Fuck you, bye. My sister cut my hair to my shoulders where I could watch it. I must serve my duty to profit with this debt and ever-present weight I take into my shovel and move from one pile to another, the rocks and red mulch expanding beyond the picnic tables. I find a gentle head bowed over a poker like a stiff, which herds litter into a ballooning bag, while overhead the clouds are swollen with white wool. I could write a psalm for us just as soon as I'm returned to my desk under the steeples of brick. But I'm here on the side of the highway and on the bench in the county jail. There's flour on her forearms. When the cops burst in, she was making tortillas. When the car pulled out, we were high on ecstasy. When they handed back my underwear, I said, thank you. My father said haircuts are an art. It was the first time I'd heard him say art. I gave my split ends to my sister. My daughter got a scythe. Pastoral 1. We long for what we have not, a serene progression of thoughts, intimacy with streams and clouds, at home inside a cloak of wool. Once we did not graze on each other, spiritually against everything. Time was something you were born with or not. In our meditations, we found a deep drought. Our staffs were like dry hands of corn. And we moved inside a system that suffered but never died. The undeniable necessity of land makes me chew through life. Living makes me spit it out. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Monica. And now we hear from Angelo Nicolopoulos. He's the author of Obscenely Yours and Pleasure from 4-Way Books. He teaches at Hunter College. Please welcome Angelo Nicolopoulos.
Thank you. This is a night of two firsts. I think this is the first time I've ever read Never Had a Drink, because there's no bar here. So let's see how this goes. And the other first is, this is the first time I've read with both Monica and Jameson, I believe. And I met both Monica and Jameson in 2008 at NYU, I believe. So it's been a long time coming. So thanks for reading with me. And I love hearing the new work. So I'm going to read from my book, Pleasure. I wrote it when I spent a summer on an island in Greece. Monica, incidentally, babysat my child at the time, who was a 6-week-old puppy, and apparently the worst time to have to deal with a puppy. So thank you. It only ruined your relationship. For the better. The book was really interested in thinking about relationships, romantic and otherwise, and thinking about love. And before I left, my mother was diagnosed with a brain tumor that required immediate operation. And so a week later, I went to this island where I was alone. And so she crept into a lot of these poems. So since Mother's Day was recently here, I'll read poems that include her. Hermopolis Port arrival scene. Through the hall's opening and erotics of contrast, a handsome priest, trim beard, silver hair, lifts the hem of his gown and fastens himself behind a boy, no older than 16, who revs his motorcycle through the sweaty crowd. I exit the ship's bows. Balcony scene. The horizon in June is as clear as a whale, and that's W-A-I-L, of course. In isolation, the self unspools as much as it reaches for meaning. E.g., the word solitude arrives in 14th century Old French via the Latin solitudo. It implies being alone in a desolate place, a desert or a wilderness. I'm unaroused by this image, but the French root soul, bachelor, unaccompanied, borrows from Saul, Germanic for soul. My heart in its smoky boudoir swells like a bladder. There's no way of knowing if this linguistic kinship is real or imagined, but I am certain of the divine velour of solitude swathing me at day's end, the words hardly necessary. Because of its silence, this balcony, as stage for my selfishness, encases the white noise of my soul. Weeks ago, incomprehensibly alone in the waiting room of Huntington Memorial, while mother's brain tumor was removed, I imagined the clutter of the operating room, ripe with activity. It disgusted me to think of it as the man beside me, bulging and specific, had appalled me. I collapsed into myself. This island is a cluttered room too, cafe lined with laughter. I drive up the narrow dirt road. I'm a singular light source above the cove. At the threshold, I find it too precious for what I intend to do. Balcony scene, laptop lit, I jerk off unromantically to straight marine fucking older. Below, the dark water goes. SOS. I am, if nothing else, unmonitored. Waking in the afternoon, I pick a fig from the tree and I do not eat it. From the field. At the foot of my bed this morning, a newborn scorpion, so new to the world, I thrashed its translucent flesh with the heel of my shoe. The terrible thing about nature is how it could end you, always and instantly, but that you could never kill it all entirely, not at once. The roof is the farthest from the dirt and the ideal place to stand against the wind. Mother immigrated to the US in 1977 into the suburban sprawl of the San Gabriel Valley, a village so dead and quiet I'd never seen. Mother hated nature because she lived in it as a child. Father chose her the way one chose a dog, the healthiest among the village lot. The day's harvest, one can experience loneliness in two ways, by feeling lonely in the world or by feeling the loneliness of the world. Picking chamomile from the field, I roam the seaside. I bend open palm toward the earth. The edge. My body exists for itself in two general forms, boredom and hysteria. Each an appetite, what I put into myself. If I smoke too early, it will ruin the entire day. Here is what I did with my body. I collected moon-colored stones, watered the basil, swept the marble floors for the pleasure of the sound. I picked and I carried ripened figs in the fold of my shirt, something seen in a film. I walked to the edge of the cliff and then I walked myself back. What I ingest, white wine, panoramic view, comes out of my body, pissing off the cliff, aesthetic fatigue. There is no other way. I am cruising because I'm alive. It's a reflexive desire, squashing the scorpion. When faced with self-annihilation at the edge of the cliff that pulses, the body says to the mind, let me live, but it cannot. One pleasure replaces another. There is no progress. Tell you what for. SOS. If it's true that there is someone for everyone, which is to say someone will find you beautiful, it must also be true. There will always be someone who finds you repulsive. Beyond Babylon. Don't make a scene. At a department store, mother slapped me hard across the face. She has been a terrible woman at times. Terrible as the black shore that continues and continues. It is a moonless night. The wind has died, as they say. Earlier on the ferry to Mykonos, I imagined the church at Panaya Paraportiani as I left it at 16, where I was fucked for the first time against the white wall. If you walk beyond Babylon, you'll find the church of Paraportiani, literally Our Lady of the Side Gate, a gay travel site reads, as its entrance is a side gate from the Castro area. Beyond the side gate, bent over at sunset, I let another man enter me again. It is an important religious monument in Greece, but now the old doorway that housed monks is a gay cruising zone. The rocky beach behind is also full of guys looking for a partner for a night. I admire the lyric for the reasons I admire the anonymous encounter, for its rootlessness, its wailing in the night for the night. At a department store, mother slapped me hard across the face. Beyond the side gate, bent over at sunset, another man entered me again. The grieving person is lyrical because the lyric obliterates the boundaries of grief by expanding them. I wail into the night, I who have returned to my solitary post, I who am no one. I have looked. While in a spiritual holding pattern, the US Supreme Court declares gay marriage a nationwide right. The sun sets, pale blaze, the color of exhausted dogwood as the news arrives, where I've spent the day singularly on the balcony in my blue shorts. Their hope is not to be condemned to live in loneliness, excluded from one of civilization's oldest institutions, Justice Kennedy writes. The judgment of the Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit is reversed. Later, washing dishes, a tight panic at the night's openness. I've made dinner, cleaned the kitchen, read an essay. I have looked out across the waves. In relationships to others, to time and location, one tries to impose form on the vast formlessness of solitary experience. I stood on the balcony for as long as I could bear it. The hardest part of being a poet, the joke goes, was knowing what to do with the other 23 and a half hours of the day. Late evening, Percy, British and septuagenarian, eats my asshole beneath the Yanis Tsarouchi's portrait of a soldier. It is an intergenerational triangulation. I do not reciprocate. In his crumbling villa, I offer myself like a vista. Consider my loves. When the music stops, I am sober. Actually, no, sorry. The trick about writing a narratively linked book is that you can't skip stuff. It's so annoying. Even electric eels. Their hope is not to be condemned to live in loneliness. On planet Romeo, where we've met, Percy asks to take me out. To fear the lonely is to fear unwholesomeness. In truth, Percy repulsed me, but I offered myself to him because I was made beautiful by the transaction. At Kefi Bar, where the local men cruise, let's do it. Let's fall in love, a woman sings to herself on the veranda. Even electric eels do it. Consider my loves. When the music stops, I am sobered and I am ashamed. It's as if being caught wearing something I should not be wearing. Evening, Crusa village, Percy's bruised a rib, a fall in the garden. So when I ride his stomach to feed him my cock from above, he shuts his eyes. When I consider my loves one by one, apart from those who are anonymous, expired, it's been a failure at each time. What was there to bring back but a handful of dirt? When I turn to say I cannot love him, it reverberates in me like a bee trapped inside a jar. SOS. This morning, picking figs from the tree, seemingly joyless, there is the pleasure of the task. I walk directly into the scene, having drunk too much the night before and every night cigarette marked. I take and I take from the tree. Is it possible to love? I do not know what I am being asked. The summer is over. For one last time, I floated sexless in the sea. Hermopolis port departure scene. After fucking bareback at Diogenes Hotel, I stand before a gold icon, El Greco's Dormition of the Virgin, in a cathedral of the same name. The Dormition is the belief that when the Virgin Mary passed from this earth, she didn't die, but slept until her soul and body were taken up to heaven and reunited. Unwashed, I feel the wetness inside my asshole loosening. It is both part of myself and outside myself, a radiating aftermath like a welt. I will soon walk to port and onto a ferry bound for Athens, and I will carry it with me. Thank you.
Please hang out. There are books by all three poets available at the register. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.